Hello, my dear viewers. I'm Olga Demchuk, a researcher of the inner world of personality. Today, I would like to talk with you about the topic of anger. Much has been said about it, but it is precisely the exploration of the different facets of anger that allows us not to reject these feelings, this emotion, but by understanding why it arises and what it is for, to learn how to manage it. When does anger arise in us? Viewers who have been watching my channel for a long time know it happens when things don't go my way. In other words, the personality is faced with the fact that the outside world either cannot or does not want to meet its needs. That is, I want something, but I am either given what I do not want, or I am not given what I do want. At the moment when we do not get what we want, we are confronted with our vulnerability every time. That is, our grandiose self, our ideal self, which seems to fill the entire world, comes into contact with this world, collides with it, and at that moment we become aware of our true size. In other words, we do not actually fall into a sense of inferiority, but rather arrive at our real self. We are the size that we truly are. Our encounter with our real size is perceived by the ideal self as a kind of weakness or inferiority. However, if we truly are in our real size, that is, if we genuinely understand the full limitations and constraints of our own abilities and the often unyielding limitations of the external world, then we feel the pain of being unable to satisfy our needs. But there is no perception of this as inferiority. There is an understanding, so to speak, of the imperfection of the universe. In fact, for a person not to experience anger at all, the external world would have to function not merely as an accepting mother or a caring parent, but rather as a perfectly protective and nurturing womb, one that anticipates and fully satisfies every possible need and desire in advance, leaving no room for frustration or unmet expectations. That is, even before the emergence of I want, so that there is not even a moment of feeling inadequate. Unconsciously, we would like to have a warm bath in which we are immersed, and everything goes exactly as we wish. Undoubtedly, no development is possible in such a state. Some people say, I don't want all my desires fulfilled, I just want less pain. But our pain or our anger is always a reaction to things not going our way. And when we get angry, in that moment, we are restoring our ideal self. In anger, we appear to ourselves as powerful and formidable. When we are angry, we feel filled from within with our own greatness. I think each of you has encountered a situation where the world somehow gave us a certain reaction. We started to get angry, to lash out, and then, once our head cooled down again, we realized that our aggressive reaction was much greater than the problem we reacted to. In other words, anger is similar to restoring the size of our ideal self. When we don't get what we want, it's as if there's a dent in our sphere, and anger restores that size again, and even pushes others out, filling everything with itself. A person who is angry is fighting for their own world, for things to be right and good, in other words, for things to be the way they want them to be. With anger, we instantly restore our subjectivity. Now, I invite each of you to recall a moment when you were angry about something, when you were enraged. In doing so, we have no doubt that things should be exactly the way we want them to be. And many people don't even realize that they are angry, that they are aggressive, simply because they are just reacting to what they perceive as the world attacking them. In other words, an angry person lives with the idea that the world is attacking them and they need to defend themselves. I need to fend off this attack. Let's take a closer look at who or what is attacking whom here. I think you know that we have an instinct for self-preservation. This is our reptilian brain, the animal within us. And our animal nature, without a doubt, demands safety. Safety is the most important thing. And the moment we find ourselves in a situation that doesn't go our way, isn't how we want or isn't how we're used to, our instinct for self-preservation reacts with a sense of insecurity. At that moment, it begins to attack the personality, forcing it to act in a way that restores a sense of safety. That is, initially, there is an attack on the self of the personality, and only then does the personality either begin to suppress its aggression, and then it starts to become rigid. It can turn this autoaggression inward, still maintaining the belief this is the right way. It's as if I failed to ensure that things were done correctly. Or it can direct this aggression toward another person, forcing them to ensure that things are done correctly and therefore safely. So the thought the world is attacking me is actually a projection outward. If we look at it from the perspective that my instinct for self-preservation is attacking me in response to certain circumstances, it becomes clearer how we can manage this emotion. I often see comments saying, but the other person really is attacking me. This inability to separate another person's behavior from oneself makes it impossible to break free from such situations. In other words, it prevents us from maintaining a clear mind. Yes, even if that person really is attacking, they might write something offensive or say something insulting. That is a direct attack. But the best way to respond to such an attack, meaning to someone's intent to cause harm, is only possible if we keep our mind and our awareness cool and composed. So when a person filled with negativity directs something toward us, at that moment our instinct for self-preservation begins to react. It perceives this as a threat and starts pushing us to take some kind of action. In this push, we become impulsive, and in that state, there is no room for choosing our response. Here, we act on autopilot. And getting stuck in conflict with people who crave these emotions brings us no satisfaction at all. We simply end up both wallowing in this mess together. And afterwards, there will be a feeling of emptiness. When I realize that no matter how the other person behaves, I am reacting because of the instinctive push for self-preservation, I understand that in this space that belongs to me, this authorship is mine, and here I can already start to change something. In other words, I can choose my response. When a person feels anger, their thinking shuts down because anger begins to flood the personality. The personality is no longer analyzing. The other person may have said something with absolutely no intention of attack. But if our instinct for self-preservation senses a lack of safety, it will interpret this as an attack. And at that moment, as they say, we switch to manual control. In other words, we shift to instinctive reactions if we do not realize that we are being driven by our own instinct for self-preservation. In interactions with others, when we instead slip into civility, submission, or people-pleasing, then instead of expressing anger, this is why people who are servile, submissive, or eager to please can be dangerous because they have the same anger, only turned inside out. Let me explain. We have an instinct for self-preservation, and sitting on the throne of our personality is either our consciousness, which is aware of the world, or the instinct for self-preservation, which wants to keep everything as it is, to create this warm bath. It is the main one, it is in charge, it reacts. And we can hand over the role of this instinct for self-preservation to the one we fear. In other words, it is already telling us what to do. It's as if we project our inner beast onto another person and begin to fear them in the same way we fear our own inner beast or the psychopath within ourselves. So people who are eager to please and submissive are those who carry this inner king, this animal, this Neanderthal with a club, and they fear others just as much as they fear themselves. And then it becomes difficult to talk about free will or a love of freedom. I think you understand that many people are constantly looking for someone to obey, someone to ask what they should do. They seek out authorities for themselves without developing on their own. And it's as if they are always searching for a shepherd and want to join his flock. Let's return once more to the instinct of self-preservation. The instinct of self-preservation can be compared to a Neanderthal with a club. In fact, our anger is a desire to destroy another person, even if we restrain ourselves. Because people who have a strong inner beast refrain from killing only because they fear punishment. And if that prohibition is lifted, then no moral principles or sense of humanity will stop them. And if you don't so much forbid yourself to feel anger, but rather acknowledge, yes, I am angry, but what else? How else can I respond? Instead of anger, how else can I react to what's happening? I can become aware of the reasons. I can try to understand the other person's circumstances, why they are behaving this way. I can understand myself. I can understand the world better. In other words, if we voluntarily let go of anger, at that moment, we gain more opportunities to think and to understand this world. Because an angry person, like that Neanderthal with a club, with his anger, feels powerful inside. But in reality, if we imagine a scenario where a person never restrained their anger and was allowed to do whatever they wanted, in the final episode, it would be a scorched planet. They would be there alone. And even themselves, they'll have to destroy themselves too, because they're used to asserting themselves through anger. And when no one else is left, only they remain, and they too must go. That's why when I read statements like, anger is wonderful, anger is creative, and so on and so forth, I reflect on this. In the animal world, yes. If we find ourselves in the jungle or in circumstances similar to the jungle, then yes. In that case, you need to let your inner beast out, and it will guide you like a dog that picks up a scent, sniffs, and finds the way out. But when we are not living in the jungle, then our anger actually hinders our development. It blocks our thinking and prevents us from connecting with others. And this creates a tremendous amount of tension that we constantly feel the need to restrain. Please share your ideas. Write down the thoughts that were mentioned and that sparked your interest, and try to continue developing the topic on your own. And I'd like to invite you to explore a new topic with me next week. There, we will try to understand how we can influence our perception of the world so that the number of emotions we experience remains manageable and does not overwhelm our consciousness. Later, we'll also reflect on how to reconnect with our deeper potential and inner growth. Also, the English version of my ebook is available. You'll find the link below the video. Thank you for watching, and take gentle care of yourself. See you soon.